For the project here, I am going to pick one of the more difficult items to measure. It's not very difficult, obviously, once you know how. The reason I'm picking it is I'll show you now in a second. I'm going to navigate down to structural foundations, and then I'm going to click on the pile caps. So the first pile cap there, 500 by 400 by 500. In fact, the pile and the pile cap are in the one item. And that's the way the architect or the engineer had kind of drawn them, although it would be easier if they separated the pile cap from the pile. And that means I can actually create two different, I suppose, dimensions, one for the pile cap, one for the pile. But as it is right now, they're in as an assembly item, and I have to deal with them as a composite item as such, which leads to it being a little bit trickier, but not impossible. So I'm going to select my piles, 500 by 400, 500 pile cap, including the pile that's below it. Select one of them and click the plus. So there it is there. That's the type name of what I'm looking for. That doesn't tell me a whole lot, so I'm going to put in pile. I'll just give that a short version and then put in the pile cap size, 500 by 500 by, I believe it's 400 thick, and that's pile cap. So it's kind of all within the one the one takeoff, my pile and my pile cap, and I'll show you how to do that. Make sure you've select BIM and again a color. You can use the default color that comes up there, that's fine. So I'm going to start with the length of my piles. I believe that's something that I'll need. Taking off steel piles. Again, to look at the properties of the pile, you click the pile and then click properties down here, and you'll see that that's the type name that was coming in. And most importantly down here, I shows if we're looking at our dimensions, where's our dimensions? There they are there. We've got a depth, we've got a width, we've got a radius, we've got a diameter. We won't have a volume in there because it's not giving us the volume of the pile. So we'll have to calculate that ourselves. So sometimes you'll get what you're looking for, and other times you'll have to extrapolate information. So I'm going to click add details. Make sure I'm selected on one of the piles, because if I don't, the object properties won't come up. The first thing is steel, pile, and length. Okay. This, of course, is going to be in substructure 102. I'm not drilling down into further detail. 102 is fine. And of course, because I'm looking for length, I'm going to change that to meters. Now, I can leave length in there, or I can change it exactly what I'm looking for as the depth of the pile and map BIM object. And once I put that in there as a formula, it's available over here as a mapping. So let's see if there is a map for depth, and I believe there is because I just checked it. Once I type it in there, BIM object property, and I can click the model properties, and I'll see the depth in there in bold mapped to that particular object property. So that one's very straightforward because it's depth to depth. Of course, change that there to the right spelling. Next item now is the volume. So obviously once I pound in my piles, I'll have to put in concrete. These are concrete filled steel piles. I'll have to put in some concrete in them, pour in concrete. So I'll click plus. Oh, wrong plus. I'll click a plus here in additional outputs, and volume concrete, might even say in piles. Again, keep it in the same category, which is substructure, and this time it's meters cubed. So volume, and of course if I had a volume attribute in there, I could map to it, but I don't. As I showed you before, it's not available. A lot of time it may be. So I need a little volume in here. So it will be the length or the depth. So I can put in that depth, which I've already mapped it. And then it's the depth times the area of the pile. So if the area of the pile times its depth will give me the volume of concrete within that pile. So what's the area, I guess, of a circle, of a cross-sectional area of a cylinder? It's a circle, and that's pi r squared. So 3.14 multiplied by the radius squared. Now I don't have, once I type in radius, I don't have radius available for me to create a formula to. So what I might do is width times width, and then to create the squared times width again. So r squared as such will be width times width, and then I'll put brackets around that. So depth times pi, 3.14, r squared, multiplied by r squared. Okay, and now of course once I put in width there, it wants to map to a width, and I'm actually looking for the radius, which is in there as an object property. So the radius essentially is what's mapped to there, 250, and that's the R squared, which is what's in there. Okay, so hopefully you're kind of getting used to the way the mapping works. So I'm going to move on quickly to click the plus button here. And now this is the pile cap. So pile cap volume. So this is the pile cap that's on top of the pile. And I say it's concrete. Again, it's going to be in the substructure. It's going to be meters cubed. And I've nothing to map to here because I have no object properties for my pile cap separate to my piles because they're an assembly item. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to type in length times, I can't use width because I use that, length times height times something like thickness. So even though that might necessarily be the best explanation of what I'm looking for down here, it's giving me 3 attributes down here to map to. And of course I said up here 500 by 500 by 400, so I could put that in. So length will be 500, or 0.5 actually, should be, because I'm using the meters. Height 0.5, thickness 0.4. Okay, so that should give me my volume. So 0.5 times 1.5 times 5 by 0.4 times the count as such. When I measure it from a bin perspective, will give me my volume. Another item will be the formwork. And let's select capital costs again, substructure, meter squared, this case. So based on those attributes, what would I do? I would be length times, click it, times 2. Make brackets around that. Plus, I'm going to go around the perimeter of that particular pile cap, plus the height times 2. It's not really the height, is it the breadth, but that's the attribute I'm using. So length times 2, and give, let's say that's the length. So either side, height times 2, let's say that's the height, depends on what way you're looking at it, times 2, so that's the perimeter. Brackets around the start and end of that to enclose that, and then multiply it by thickness, which I've already mapped it there. It's 0.4. So I guess the perimeter times the thickness gives me the surface area of formwork that needs to be calculated. So that's the formwork there. Moving on from that, the last item here will be the rebar to pile cap. And select again the substructure, select this time, it'll be in tons. And it's the volume of my pile cap, which I basically calculated here, so I can actually copy it or write it out again, it doesn't really matter. Copy that from the volume of the pile cap, type it in here, Control V it, copy paste, put brackets at the start, brackets at the end, and multiply it by, start typing in weight. Is it weight by length, weight by area, weight by volume? Well, it's weight by volume since I'm looking for my weight by volume. And you'll have to look at your cost plan to get the weight per volume of cubic meters of concrete for the pile cap. So let's say it's 300. So I don't know what it is. It could be 280. Okay, so once that's done, I think that's pretty much everything. I can start my takeoff. So let's hopefully I've captured everything here. There's all my pile caps. Now what I can do is I can select them all, but that would take me absolutely forever. So I'm going to highlight all my pile caps by basically holding down my left click button on my mouse and kind of drawing a rectangle around all those items and then releasing. So that's 641 items selected. So once I click correct, and make sure that you put the correct in there, otherwise it won't measure it. 5128, 1064.1, 512.8, rebar to pile cap 19.23. Now again, that might be slightly different depending on what you put in there in weight. Depending on what I've done before. But that gives a little recap, I suppose, on that. Now, if you wanted to, you could create a separate item for the second group of pile caps that is in here. So I scroll up and just collapse that. The 500 by 400. Now these are really the same, so I can navigate to them. They're just different depths really. Highlight them. You can see that they're all selected because they're blue. Click my pile cap, click correct, and those 30 goes in there, 671. So 5323, that goes to 1,000 meters cubed, the volume. A lot of quantities in here. Pile cap volume 67, 536, etc., etc. So hopefully that covers the piles, and I'll leave it at that for this little tutorial.